Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you to today's episode and broadcast of Parenting Accurately. I'm so glad that you guys joined us. I'm so glad that you're here, whether you're here joining us live or you're watching the replay. If you could, take a moment and just leave in the comments where you're tuning in from. I know that we have people that have gathered to the page from all over the United States and even in a couple other countries. So we'd love to get to know you. We'd love to hear from you. And by the way, we, as everybody knows, you may know, we're going to have the grief guru, Kelli, on the show in just a few minutes. We're going to be walking through grief, and she has an amazing story. She is inspiring. She's an author. But if you have a question, write it in the comments. And if we can, near the end of the broadcast today, we'll get to a couple of them. So again, thank you guys, and I want to welcome you to today's show. Again, it's so inspiring to see what's happening here. Many lives are being changed. People are emailing in, writing in the comments about what they've learned. If this show is inspiring to you, if you just learn something from this, I encourage you to let us know. Again, we want to get to know you. We want to build a community of parents who are parenting accurately. And parenting accurately isn't about being perfect parents. I just want to remind everybody, there is no perfect parent. I am not perfect. Parenting accurately is really about trying to hit the mark. I've told you guys before, I see like a bow and arrow, and when you shoot an arrow into the target, the goal is to hit the bullseye. But how many of you know, if you don't hit the bullseye, you don't quit. You pick up another arrow and you shoot again. And I think that's what the parenting and parenting accurately is about. It's about learning how to become more accurate in our parenting, but yet also not being afraid to pick up another arrow and shoot again. And this is a daily thing for all of us. If you have kids, if you have many kids or multiple kids, it can be even more challenging. So this community it's growing rapidly, it's strengthening, and more than anything else, I believe that Parenting Accurately is a movement of hope. It's a movement of hope to parents, because parenting is a tough job, especially as kids get into the teenage years. Parenting takes on a whole nother level, a whole nother side of it. And we're here to help you. We're here to come alongside of you, encourage you, give you tools and lessons and training. And by the way, I'm working on a plan right now on some curriculum and a program that we'll be able to offer everybody here in the next few weeks, maybe in the next month or two. We'll give you guys an opportunity to come in to a Parenting Accurately program. It'll be an intensive program, a very interactive program that will give you many tools and tips and help to help you in your parenting journey. So definitely you guys want to be on the lookout for that. That's coming up here pretty soon. So just want to take a minute and thank our sponsor for the week, Paramount Solutions, Inc. They are a consulting firm that helps businesses with many different areas of consulting, from cost analysis to, if there's like an area or a department in your business that's kind of like chaotic and you need some help getting control of it, they are experts in that. So we want to thank Paramount Solutions for their sponsorship of the show. So I'm excited. I'm very privileged and very excited to welcome our guest today. Her name is Kelli. She's known as the Grief Guru. Kelli, thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited about this show. Many people I've seen comments and people have sent in different emails about what this, I know that there's some buzz going on about what's about to happen here. Grief is something that we don't like to talk about, especially as men, we don't want to cry. Grieving is something we don't do. So thank you for being here, and thank you for taking the time to share with us.
Yeah, it's absolutely my pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity to share with your audience and your listeners some of the mysteries and complexities surrounded around grief. And honestly, that's That's why I do what I do, because when in times when I've been faced with grief and forced to deal with grief, I didn't find good examples or resources out there. There's a whole lot of misconceptions about grief. There's a whole lot of kind of theories or belief systems that people have adopted, but there's not a lot of victory walking around. There's not a lot of people who've recovered and are walking and healing and showing up how to do it. So anytime I get an opportunity to just share some tools and resources to help people get unstuck from grief, I'm just happy to do it.
Yeah, I love the title of what we called today, Walking Through Grief.
Yeah.
So grief is not a destination. It's something that we can walk through, and we all do. I mean, like you mentioned earlier over the weekend, that in the welcome video or the introduction, the invitation to this podcast or to the show was that grief is, everybody experiences it.
Yeah.
If you've lived any amount of time or any length of time, we've all experienced some grief, some more severe than others, but grief doesn't have to remain. We don't have to stay there.
Absolutely. Actually, anytime that what happens in real life doesn't meet your expectation, that's grief shows up.
Right.
So a lot of even parents, they have expectations about what it means to have a child, and many of them pray to be able to become a parent, and then they they become a parent and realize that sleepless nights and all of the other stuff that goes with parenting, that was not what they thought it was going to be. And there's even a little bit of grief around that like just wrapping your head around not what you thought would be, but what is, and coming to terms with that and how you view that and how you move forward with that and cooperate with that is going to determine your level of satisfaction in life, your level of healing and wholeness, no matter what it is. So, around the fact that sleepless nights is a part of being a parent, the quicker you can do that, the better off you're going to be. No different with a job or a divorce or even a loss of a loved one. If you had an expectation you're going to grow old with this person, or as a parent, you are going to see your child grow up and get married and have kids of their own, coming to grips with the fact that that is not what's going to happen going forward.
Right.
A big pill to swallow, but it is swallowable.
Yeah.
Are things that you can do to help move along in the process and, continue or to rebuild a life that's meaningful and full of joy for yourself.
Right. Now, I've had the privilege of getting to know you a little bit and hearing more about your history and what has really led you up to this point to where you now are helping thousands of others with getting through their grief. So take a moment and share with everybody a little bit about your story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am no stranger to grief. Like I say, I didn't and I want to be the grief guru when I grow up. No little girl wishes for that when she's little, but I had grief come at me in a lot of different forms. I've experienced bankruptcy, I've experienced divorce, I'm a 2-time cancer survivor. So I've had kind of a lot of opportunities to learn from grief throughout my life. But I experienced what I call the Super Bowl of grief actually 3 years ago, February 1st, 3 years ago, when my mom took her own life.
Wow.
There were and are a lot of circumstances around that. There's a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot of speculation about my father's involvement. It just really was a nightmare. The joke for me at the time was that my life was like an episode of Dateline. Like nobody could relate. My friends, people who loved me and wanted to be there to support me, just couldn't. They didn't know what to say. They didn't want to say the wrong thing. And so they ended up kind of keeping their distance, which just isolated me and compounded the pain of my grief. And as I was sharing with you before, I was a person of faith before that happened. And I would have told you that I was a person of impeccable faith, that I trusted God completely. But honestly, when that happened, my family shattered. I thought that God was a cruel joke. I thought that I had put my faith in something that wasn't in fact real. And I really grappled with that for several months. How I like to describe it is grief came in like a flood and it swept me out to sea. For several months, I just had a very tough time even functioning, getting out of bed, being able to go. I was in a ministry role in leadership, and I could not do that job. I had to make a job change just for my own self-care and just really struggled. I looked for help. I went to a suicide support group, which was nice to be in a room full of people who could understand what I was going through, but it was incredibly demoralizing and depressing, the fact that everybody in that room surviving just like me. And for many of them, it had been several months or even since their loved one had passed away. And so I just started to resign myself to the fact that this was going to be my life going forward. And that's a really sad place to be, to lose your hope for healing and recovery. But for me, and I share the story every time, it had such a profound impact on my life. I saw a woman speaker who had survived the Rwandan genocide, and she shared on stage in horrific detail about being hid away in a bathroom for 3 months with 8 other women while 1 million people around her were being massacred. She literally heard over the radio her entire family killed. Wow. And she shared how not only God helped her to survive that ordeal, but then he walked her through a healing process, so much so that she ended up meeting the man in prison who massacred her family, and she was able to forgive him. Now, the most important part for me when I saw that woman speak was not even that she survived or even that she was able to forgive, but I saw her full of joy. I saw her with peace. I saw her with expectation for good. I saw her enjoying her life. And for me, that was a huge light bulb moment that if God will do it for her, he'll do it for me. And I decided in that moment that I could, in fact, recover, that I could get back to living a joy-filled life. And so for me, that was the beginning of this exploration to find the tools I needed and the support I needed and the resources to begin living again. And so I did just that. I just through a lot of prayer, a lot of reading, I got everything I could get my hands on, and honestly, trial and error, just being hyper to what was helping me and what was hurting me, being very cognizant in my eyes and my ears and my mouth, and just taking radical self-care to begin to heal and recover. Wow. And I'm thankful, so thankful that I did. Because little did I know that just a year and a half after my mom passed away, grief would show up again on my front door. My 20-year-old son died of an accidental drug overdose on July 8th of 2018. And so here I was just getting my feet back under me, feeling like myself again. And I find out through social media, of all things, that my son passed away. And grief was there like a flood, but this time I knew how to ride the waves. I could use the momentum of grief. I could be more in control of it. And my grieving process and recovery was night and day difference between when I lost my mom and when I lost my son. And that's when I really started to feel compelled and convicted that I needed to teach other people how to do this, that when devastating loss shows up in your life, it doesn't have to completely take you out of the game. And so that kind of was when the grief guru was born, for lack of a better term. Yeah.
So walk us through, what does that look like? I mean, so it sounds like there's an unhealthy way to process grief, and then there's a healthy way.
Right.
So what is it? So what does a healthy way look like? I mean, we could take the time and talk about an unhealthy way. But I'm sure that all of us probably have processed grief in an unhealthy way at one point or another. So what does it look like to process grief in a healthy way?
Yeah. Well, so the process that I coach people through is a 5-step process. But what we'll focus on here is the first step, because it's the most important step. It's the step that if you don't do it, you won't ever advance to any of the other steps. And it's also the step that most people skip or forget, or they don't know to do it. So the first step is establishing your framework. And your framework is consisted of, what do you believe, what do you want, and who's your example? So this awful thing has come at your life, and what do you believe about it? So for example, a practical example is, with my mom passing away, I started to believe that I was never going to recover from that. And that belief was the thing that was actually keeping me stuck. So when I saw that example of Immaculate, and I began to believe I can recover from this, that was hugely important. Because if you believe that you're going to be sad for the rest of your life, that you can't ever possibly recover, or especially for parents who've lost kids, some of us feel guilty, that somehow it means we didn't love our kids, or we didn't love our spouse, or we didn't love whoever we lost if we're happy after they pass away. And that's a lie. Right. So you have to take the time to take inventory about, what are your beliefs about this? And then secondarily, what do you want? And are your beliefs in alignment with where you're trying to go? And be very intentional about what you want. And there's a whole bunch of traps hidden in the what do you want question, right? Because when somebody dies, it's very natural to want a lot of things. A lot of us want answers, especially if
Yeah.
somebody dies suddenly and it's tragic. Like our mind screams for answers, and it's not even wrong. God wired us with rational minds, and our minds want to make sense of it. But the question is, are you pursuing answers at the cost of peace? In the case of my mom, I wanted answers. I was screaming for answers. And for months, between the police and the hospital and my dad, I was just searching and searching for answers. And I had to come to a point where I realized my search for answers was costing me my peace. And I decided my peace was more important than my need for answers.
Yeah.
Another caution I give people who are searching for answers is you may get answers and that may not give you peace. So be careful if you're choosing, if the thing you want is answers, just have your eyes wide open that may or may not bring you peace. Some other things that people want is, so people can get stuck in this is not fair, God, and you can live the rest of your life on the fact that it's not fair.
Hmm.
And I just encourage people that God doesn't want what's fair for you. He wants so much more than what's fair. But in order to receive God's best for you, you have to lay down your right for what's fair. You have to surrender your right for what's fair. Because God's a gentleman, he's only going to cooperate and participate in your life as much as you let him. So if you demand from God what's fair, you've literally just put a cap on how much he can interact and intervene in your life.
Yeah.
And
That
then the
makes a lot of
last one I
sense.
want to touch on, and this is a big one, especially in our country, is sympathy. Oh, that's and oh, it's a trap that we all fall in when we're hurt. Something bad happens. It's natural to want people to comfort us, to want people to, and that's good, and you should. But when it starts to become your identity, when it starts to become the thing that you're, the only thing that you're doing, or the only thing you're talking about, or the only way you're getting comfort is from other people, be careful because that can be a trap that you get stuck in the place of just wanting sympathy. So you perpetually are talking about the loss and you're perpetually reliving it and you're perpetually sharing it with other people. And we know now neurologically, you're actually reliving that trauma over and over again. And so what you're doing is wiring your brain to stay stuck in the place of hurt and pain. What I help people to do is to be intentional with their thoughts and to put a limit on how long they're going to meditate or ruminate on things, and to replace that thinking with positive, joy-filled, uplifting, and funny. We talk about using humor to help break up that cycle so that your brain knows how to respond differently.
Right. Now, one of the things when you were sharing is I thought about justice. And,
Mhm.
we all want answers, but sometimes, depending on what happens, sometimes we want justice.
That's another one. Yep.
And that, I think, could be a big hindrance because, and I'm not the guru here, but so I'm basically asking you this question. I would think, though, that if we're caught up on something, whether it could be anything, whether it's answers or justice, the need for justice, or that
hmm
may be a hindrance to the process of grief.
Right. Yes. But it's very personal. And this is where you have to know yourself. You have to know, one of the things that you learn when you're going through grieving, if you do it the right way, is you get radically self-aware about your emotional energy, how much you have, how much you can spend on things, and how much you can't afford to spend on things. It's incredibly draining when you're walking through grief to just get out of bed in the morning. So you
Right.
learn to reserve your energy and only use your energy on the things that truly matter and the things that promote healing. So again, in my instance, I wanted justice for my mom so much. I was this close to calling news media because I wanted everyone to know. I felt like the police failed my mom, the hospital system failed. There's a whole backstory, but I got to the point where I had to look at myself and say, do I emotionally, do I financially, do I have the resources at my disposal to tackle this? Is it worthwhile for me to tackle this? And more importantly, is God calling me to tackle this? Is this amount,
Yeah.
is he wanting me to expose this injustice or let it go? Because God's only responsible to pay for the stuff that he calls you to do. And so in my case, I determined he was not calling me to tackle that mountain. And the cost to me personally and to my family to go through that with that and speak to the media was too high of a price. And so I laid it down.
Yeah.
And so what I try to get people to is deciding what they want. Hopefully, what they want is peace. Hopefully, what they decide where they want to go is having peace in their life and the restoration of joy. And I help explain that, our Lord is the Prince of Peace, and He promised peace that surpasses understanding. But in order to do that, that you submit and surrender your need for those other things.
Right.
So you have to work through a process to like lay down your need for answers, lay down your need for justice or vengeance, because vengeance belongs to the Lord. You need to lay down your need for sympathy and lean on Him for sympathy and comfort. And when you do that, He is faithful to give you peace that surpasses understanding. And that's what I have been walking in, and what I help other people to tap into and walk in their own lives. And the last little piece about the framework is, who's your example? Because it's one thing to know this information, it's one thing to see it on paper and say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But who in your life do you know has done this, is walking in it, that you can learn from and walk with? It's
Right.
so important to find people who have what you want and to learn from them. And that's why, for me, just even seeing Immaculate speak on that stage that one time was life changing for me, because I saw an example of what I wanted. I saw that it was possible. And so I encourage everyone, whether it's me or whether if you can find someone in your own personal life or your own community that has done this well, go, learn from them, link up with them, be
Yeah.
coached by them, and figure it out.
And so you have a book actually that you're about to release on
Yes.
this, and
Yes.
anybody that we'll share that with everybody as we close the broadcast today. But that'd be a great resource for anybody that's experienced grief and they feel like maybe it's still lingering or affecting their life. And I mean, I know some family members that I have that have allowed grief to stay their entire life.
Yeah.
And it's
'Cause that's
manifest.
what
Yeah, it's even manifest in their body in sickness. And it's really a sad thing to see.
Yeah, grief affects you. It's very holistic in nature. It affects your thinking and your mental capacity. It affects your energy. It affects your physicality. A lot of people get sick. Your whole. Imagine you were in an awful car crash. That's kind of the equivalent. Your
Hmm.
body and your brain and your emotions and your hormones all go through tremendous shock. And so you need to do as many things as you can to promote restoration and healing. Part of the reason why I wrote the book is there are a lot of books out there about grief, and I have not read all of them. I've read a lot of them. And there's a lot of books that describe grief. They explain to you all the things of grief, and they give you permission that, it's going to take a long time, and they like kind of make it okay for you to be grieving. But there's not very many books that say, and here's what you can do to accelerate it or to promote your own healing. Every day, every choice that we make, every thought that we think, every food that we eat, everything that we watch is
Right.
either promoting healing or destruction in our mind and body. And so there's no other time when you're grieving that you have to be hyper vigilant on those choices and really pick the choices and people and media and music that is going to be healing to you and not hurtful to you. But if you'll learn that skill, if you can do that when you're grieving, then you can do it the rest of your life. You can
Right.
actually acquire these skills that will serve you so well in the rest of your life. And that's one of the gifts that grieving offers, is that you find an inner strength you didn't know you had. Especially if you work with me, you're going to grow skills that you probably didn't have before. You're going to get better at that, and that is going to serve you well the rest of your life. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, what are some of the things, like, you mentioned being self-aware, that's key.
mhm,
In this process, you really need to become self-aware.
mhm.
What are some of the things that we could do, whether that's maybe we're not very good at that?
Yeah.
What can we do to help get in touch with our self-awareness?
Yeah. Two big things. I mean, one easy one is to start to become aware of thinking about what you're thinking about. And so many of us just let our thoughts kind of wander, and especially when grief comes in and our thoughts seem to have more control over us than we do them. And so that's a skill and it's a discipline, but it can be taught and you can teach yourself how to do it. And so you can start as simply as journaling every morning and every night, to just say, to just take 2 minutes and pay attention to how do you feel physically? What are the thoughts going on in your head? Are you looking forward to the day? Are you not looking forward to the day? and just jot that down. That's going to start to make you more aware of how you're feeling and what you're thinking about. As you grow from there, as you become more aware of the dialogue that's going on in your mind, you're going to find that you have more ability to control it. But one of the things that I teach people in step one is establishing a framework for themselves, a couple of sentences that they've chosen to meditate on and literally condition their mind to think. So, for example, when my son passed away, the framework that I had was, my son is not gone. He's just not here. I will see him again one day, and we'll have all of eternity to spend together. I cannot tell you how many times I said that sentence, and I repeated it and repeated it. And when grief would come in, and eventually, it turns out our minds are actually programmable.
Oh, well.
Whatever you think about enough, it becomes a conditioned response. So after enough time of doing that, when grief would want to come in, my mind would automatically kick into that framework. And
all right, we're going to have to pause here for a moment, guys. We lost her. So give me just a moment. We'll get her back. The joys of technology. Should be able to get her on just a moment. You know, that's one of the things about doing this live, guys, is that we have to be patient. Sometimes things will happen, I suppose. You there again? All right. Just give me 1 second to get you on. Sorry about that. Not sure what happened, but we'll get you back live here.
I love that. I was question mark there for a minute.
It's like, hey, what happened? All right, you're back. Thank you guys for your patience. Hopefully that doesn't happen again, but we're here.
We're here.
So continue. Apologize for that.
That's okay. So, you know, that the framework is so positive and helpful. Even as you're learning to monitor your thinking, you're becoming more aware of your thoughts. So even if you don't have that skill fully formed, that's why I encourage people when we work together to create a framework, I tell them to have it written with them, you know, put it on the bathroom mirror, have it with them in their car, have it in their purse, because one of the things, grief and trauma, it really limits your decision-making ability, and your brain function is marginalized for a season. So even if you can't remember your framework, to have it on paper in front of you and read it out loud does volumes in terms of restoring your brain chemistry and helping to divert and redirect those overwhelming grief thoughts and sorrowful thoughts. So that's one of the tools and tactics I use with people.
Awesome. And so what would be like a clue, like, you know, say I'm not sure if I'm still experiencing grief over something that may have happened, you know, say 10 years ago.
Yeah.
What would some of the tells, as we're becoming more self-aware of this process, what would be an indication to me that would say that I'm going through an unhealthy process?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things. Number one, I have a quick assessment for people that they can do at griefassessment.com. It's just a free little tool to kind of check in with you to see, and it measures some different areas of your life to find out if you're having unresolved stuff. And it also helps you to know where to start. If you are working through grief, it can, because like I said, grief is holistic and affects a lot of different things. But I think one of the surest ways is when you think about a loss or a painful experience, what comes up for you when you think about that? When it comes up, if you find that it's incredibly painful and there's a lot of sorrow there, and or if you find that you don't even think about it, you just stuff it right back down right away, and you're not comfortable sitting with it, sitting with the reality of the loss loss or the disappointment or whatever it is. And yes, there's going to be some sadness there, but I think that's a very telltale sign how comfortable you are with it and speaking about it. And that doesn't mean that tears don't come, and that doesn't mean you're not sad, but like the level of the emotional response that comes up, either very strong or none at all, would kind of tell me that maybe you've been, you haven't dealt fully with it, or that you stuffed it and haven't dealt with it at all. So those might be a couple of the signs. If you keep yourself so super busy and overbooked and extended because you don't want to sit still long enough to think about XYZ, that is a surefire sign that you have some unresolved stuff you need to look at.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So in wrapping and discussing that a little bit further and deeper, there's a difference between, would you say that there's a difference between grief and sadness? Or are they just, what does that look like?
Well, and actually, even biblically speaking, the Lord talks about a time of mourning. There's mourning, and then there's grief. And there is a time for mourning. It's God ordained where people with emotions, we have love and attachments to people. And when they pass away, it's hard. And there's a mourning time. And mourning is the healthy way of expressing sorrow and sadness that you've lost someone and working through that. Grief, though, is actually a thing that comes and sits in you and can keep you stuck. That's the thing when you look up the meanings of those words in scripture, grief actually is demonstrated almost like a sickness. And so it's the thing that will keep you stuck. So you want to know that you're going through a season of mourning, and that sadness is part of it, and expressing sadness is part of it. But when you wallow and meditate and ruminate, that's when you have the breeding ground for grief. And grief is the thing that becomes permanent. Grief is the thing that says you can't recover from this, and it begins to permeate the rest of your life. If you lost someone, it affects your work, your other relationships. It's the thing that spreads everywhere. So what we want to do is help isolate the sadness and work through the process of loss, for sure, but to still promote and foster those parts of your life that are healthy and that are working well. And we want to recognize and celebrate the parts that aren't connected to the loss.
Right. Well, I'm sure that there's so much more that we can there's a lot more depth to go into when we talk about this and how to get through it and how to get over it. I want to encourage everybody that if you're listening and you feel like, yeah, that's me, I've certainly got some grief still in my life or my heart, and it does affect you. And I think that's really one of the important things about today is to understand that grief does affect us. And if we're still having it in our heart, it's weighing us down. It's a weight. I almost see it like mold as it grows. It will affect your attitude. It'll affect your heart. It'll affect, I would say, even your body. It could affect you physically, your thinking. So it's important so grief is really no good. I mean, taking a time for mourning is healthy, right? But entering into grief is something that we really should stay away from.
Absolutely. And if you find yourself stuck in it, get out of it as soon as you can, and know that you can, and you are responsible to, actually. I always say, trauma was not your fault, but healing is your responsibility.
Wow.
As it relates to parenting, if you're a parent and grief is affecting you, if it's affecting your mood, your energy, your decision making, it's affecting the way you're parenting. And so you actually have a responsibility to handle the stuff that's going on with you. And that's what allows you to parent accurately. Yeah. It'd be really easy for me with having lost my son. I have a daughter as well, a 14-year-old daughter. And, one extreme I've seen parents go is then they want to put that remaining child in a bubble, and they're hypersensitive and they now can't leave the block because they're so afraid that child is going to die. And obviously, that's going to be damaging to the child. So you really have to start with yourself and do your due diligence to clean up any unresolved issues inside of you, so that you can, because the best thing you can do for your kid any day, every day, is be an example of an emotionally healthy, socially responsible, great boundaries, all that kind of stuff. If you can show them what that looks like up close and personal, that is the best parenting you ever provide. And certainly grief is no exception.
Yeah. Well, we're going to end the program in a few minutes, but please take a moment and share with everybody more about your book, because I believe this will be a great tool for anybody, and it's very easily attainable.
Yeah.
as soon as you launch it. So I'm excited about it. Share with everybody about that.
Yeah. So the name of my book is You're Not Crazy, You're Grieving. Because anyone who's been through grief, you can feel like you're going crazy because, like we said, it affects all of your mind, body, emotions, all of that kind of stuff. I'm very excited about it. It's the first half of the book is just more in depth about my story, a little bit what we shared here, and then the second half of the book is the full explanation of these 5 steps. And you really can read the book. There's some checklists in there. There's some exercises in there. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer kind of person, it gives you everything that you need to develop your own roadmap to restoration and get back on the path for healing and wholeness. And we're launching it on February 16th, which just happens to be my birthday. But so what we're offering, I'm giving for my birthday, I'm giving everyone else a gift that on launch day, February 16th, you can actually get the book for 99 cents on Amazon. So I would love as many people to just grab hold of that resource for 99 cents and be able to get unstuck from grief. So people can go even right now to you're not crazy, you're grieving.com, and they can sign up there to join a wait list, and then we'll send an invite out shortly before launch day where they can grab that book for 99 cents.
Yeah, and we'll be sure at the end of this broadcast to put those links or that link out in the comments so everybody has access to that. That's going to be great. I'm really excited about that. Happy early birthday. What a way to spend your birthdays, to pretty much give a book away. I mean, 99 cents, who does that?
Right.
That's great.
I'm excited.
It's going to help a lot of people. So we have decided we're going to come back again near the end of this week, and we're going to have you on again. We're going to discuss about being, a healthy parent.
Yeah.
And it would be impossible to be a healthy parent if we ourselves are not healthy.
Yeah.
And so many times when we talk about parenting, we think about what our kids need to change and what we need to do to help them change, and to keep your room clean and to be responsible and to have manners and learn respect and all those things. And those are all valid. They're very important. However, if we ourselves are not healthy, again, like everything kind of goes through a filter. All of our parenting skills goes through that filter of who we are. If we're still hanging on to grief and we're not happy and we're grumpy, we're going to parent in that way, in that fashion. Right. And then that's in turn going to then our kids are going to pick up on that. And then they're going to walk around grumpy. They're going to walk around they're going to repeat, because we're models.
Yeah.
We're role models for our kids. And they, sometimes we get mad because they do what we do. We're like, hey, you shouldn't do that. Oh, but you do.
Yeah.
Like, don't do what I do. Do what I said.
They're watching what you do, not what you say, so you can tell them whatever, but they're watching what you do. Yeah, I think, and perhaps I do a lot about radical self-care, in my coaching, the book. And so, we can just focus on some different areas of radical self-care look like as a parent, and how can you take the best care of you so that you can be the best parent to your kids. That's
awesome. Well, we'll drop that event later today, guys. That's going to be a powerful time. Yeah. Talking about like doing, parenting. I remember my dad, I'll never forget this. When I was learning how to drive, it was in Iowa a long time ago. In Iowa then, you can get your learner's permit at 14 years old.
Okay.
So I was driving like at 8, 9. In fact, a funny story of me, I got my first ticket at 4 years old.
What?
Truth. Yep. It came out in the newspaper, everything. Small town, Iowa. I was driving a lawnmower that my dad turned into a go-kart. Yeah. And I was cruising around on the street and got in trouble for that. But I remember I was driving and he gave me some instruction, and then he says, you shouldn't be, don't do that. I'm like, wait a minute, but you do. And then his immediate response was, don't do as I do as I say.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've all been there as parents. I think it's one point or another to where we're literally, we don't even realize what we're teaching our kids by our own behavior. We are not realizing that we're teaching our kids by the way that we respond to things.
Yeah.
And so if we're grieving, if we're stuck in a process of grieving that's hindering our heart and our emotional health, our mental health, our physical health, then we really pass those traits, we pass that on to our kids. And so it's important to be self-aware. So I'm excited about your book. Can't wait to get a hold of it.
Yeah, thank
Again,
you.
everybody, take advantage of that opportunity. 99 cents for a book, a powerful book. So we'll be sure to put the links in the comments in just a few minutes. But thank you for your time, and thanks for agreeing to come back. The next session, the next broadcast is going to be powerful and dealing with
Yeah, looking
ourselves.
forward to it.
Anything to say to kind of prepare us, because nobody wants to look at ourselves, right?
Mm.
It's not fun. I don't want to look and figure out what's wrong with me. Do you have any advice or anything to say that would help us? Anything that we could think about from now until the end of the week when we go live again that would help us prepare for that broadcast?
Yeah. It isn't at all about pointing out what's wrong or broken with you. It's learning how to take really good care of you.
There
And
you
a lot of time as parents, we take care of everybody before us. I'm just going to speak as a mom.
go.
Moms are notorious for this. We make sure everybody's okay before we're okay. And, there's a reason on the airplane why they have you put your own oxygen mask on first before you help others. And so, just if you can understand that taking really good care of you is the best thing that you can do to take good care of the people around you, if you can get that firmly established in you, then it'll be easy to implement radical self-care. And you're fine the more you do it, surprisingly, you're going to have more energy and more ability to love and manage, your life and those around you. So I think people should be excited. We're going to teach some not taking a lot of time, just very simple, practical things that you can do to help restore your energy and promote healing and just bring balance to your own life. So
Awesome. Looking forward to
yeah.
it. It'll be very good. Well, thank you again for joining us, Kelly.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And we look forward to seeing you in a couple days.
All righty. Sounds
good. All right, guys. Well, thank you again for joining us here in this live broadcast. I apologize again for earlier when we lost her. We'll figure out what's going on there so that doesn't happen again. But leave in the comments what you think. If you have any questions, again, Kelly's going to join us again later in the week, and it'll be a great opportunity to continue a journey of learning how to parent more accurately. Thank you, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.